It's that time of the day again. It is more Hearthstone card reveals. We're almost at the end. There's only 2 classes after Mage, which we're going to go through right now. Hunter tomorrow and Death Knight the day after that. So we've nearly got the full picture of the set. And there are some real fun mechanics within it. And Mage is no different. They have honestly, a very classic mechanic, as we'll see in a moment. Anyway, we did get a sneak peek of one of the cards early. If you remember, it was Puzzle Master Khadgar, who was a 6-mana 5/5 Battlecry, Equipper 0/6 Wisdom Ball that casts helpful mage spells. And by helpful mage spells, there's like a small pool of almost like classic mage spells like Frostbolts and Fireballs and Flame Strikes, that type of deal. And Khadgar will cast what he believes is the best one, considering the board state that it's in at that moment. And then the Wisdom Ball loses durability. So you get that for 6 turns. If this card is any good, then this card will see play, because it is the ultimate Ruin Khadgar's day, right? So you get 1 use of the Wisdom Ball, Rustrock Viper comes in and destroys it. And again, if there's any other decks out there with big weapon synergies, and we've already seen that Rogue maybe will run one with their aggro deck, he might get caught in the crossfire. Anyway, I'm about to spoil Khadgar's day, because I don't think Mage will be running any minions. Sneaky tip. Alright, Galactic Projection Orb. This is the other legendary for Mage. 10 mana arcane spell. Recast a random spell of each cost you cast this game. Targets enemies if possible. Very cool. Grand Magister Romath was about to rotate out. Casino Mage is, he's doing okay right now, not the toppiest deck. But I played it recently on the channel and went 7-0 with it on camera. And then, I can't remember what it was, 4-2 off camera there or thereabouts. So it's not a completely awful deck. The casino was going to be closed when Romath rotated out. A new casino is open next door, and it's bigger and it's brighter and has a Galactic Projection Orb in it. Also worth noting, as it is a spell, you could duplicate this with Audio Splitter if you were so inclined, and cast many Galactic Projection Orbs. Again, spoilers, I don't think you're going to be running minions in your Galactic Projection Orb deck, but it's just worth bearing in mind. Anyway, obviously you'll be wanting to run some big spells with this. Mage has a few big spells, some are rotating out right now. In fact, they don't have an 8 or a 9 cost spell right now in Standard, I believe. Sunset Volley, 10 mana, doesn't see any play. Flame Strike is rotating back in, very good control tool. Fireland's Portal sees almost 0 play. It's okay. And Elemental Inspiration sees a little bit of play in the Sith, and it did see a lot of play, in fact, in the Sith Combo Wombo deck. Maybe you play a Spell School deck around your Galactic Projection Orb, and maybe you do put the Elemental Inspiration in there with that. It is worth noting, by the way, it's probably a good thing there are no 8-cost spells in the deck, because you might accidentally cast a Wheel of Death, so there are ways to, discount your spells and that type of deal. Be very, very careful about casting 8-mana spells with the Galactic Projection Orb in play, because you already know it, right? The amount of times when you do Yogg and you get a Tome Tampering and it discards your entire hand. Good luck with Wheel of Death. You play an 8-mana spell accidentally, Galactic Projection Orb, Wheel of Death goes, destroys your entire deck, you die in, well, you know what? You don't die within 5 turns, you die within probably 1 or 2 turns with no deck, so yeah, just bear that in mind. It's also worth noting in the 10-cost department, there is only the Mage spell. What was it called? The Sunstrike one? I forgot what it's called now. I've already forgotten what it's called. Such is how little play it sees. The only other 2 spells are Climatic Necrotic Explosion, which would be a really bad roll, as you can't improve it with corpses. And Table Flip, which is fine, but again, it's a spell you kind of want to discount, so there's no real drive to play Sunset Volley, right? You're probably better at looking at your 7, 6, 5s and below spells. Anyway, so why do I keep saying why are we not playing minions with this? Well, manufacturing error is one of the reasons. 6 mana, draw 3 cards. If your deck has no minions, they cost 3 less. Alright, back in, I think it was Madness of the Dark Moon Fair and Ashes of Outland and that type of era, we had this deck which got heavily nerfed. We had Mage Stone for a while, where you would run absolutely no minions in your deck. You would try and find Deck of Lunacy as quickly as possible. You would cast it, especially after casting Incanter's Flow 2 times. And you would just play the true casino game. Just random spells in your deck, and eventually you would just break down your opponent. And this is definitely a nod back to that. So it's kind of like Deck of Lunacy compared to your Galactic Orb now. So that deck, to make it work, had Incanter's Flow, we had Apex's Blast, and we had Font of Power. This manufacturing error is closely related to, I suppose, Font of Power and the fact that it is draw 3 cards. Font of Power wasn't exactly draw 3 cards, you just got a Mage minion if you had no minions in your deck. You kept all 3, so it was like 1 mana, get 3 Mage minions. This is draw 3 cards that are in your deck, they get discounted by 3, so you could almost argue this is minus 3 mana on this card if you include that you're taking the 3 mana off the spell. Obviously that's not quite the way Mass works, and there's probably a lot of cards in your deck that are going to be costing less than 3, so you won't get the full 3 mana discount on manufacturing error. It's still a very solid card, and in fact it's pretty well statted for your Galactic Orb. Also, sorry, I've jumped the gun a little bit here. As a little note, this is the effect of Skull of Gul'dan without the Outcast requirement on it. Instead of the requirement is having no minions in your deck. And for Mage, that's not an awful requirement. Now, Skull of Gul'dan used to be seen as an OP card at 5 mana. At 6, it saw a lot less play. Not none, but a lot less. I think Manufacturing Error will see... I think this no-spell Mage will be a thing. And I think it's going to be relatively strong. But we'll have to see the full impact of it. Just, it's so random that it's hard to say if it's going to be like tier 1 or it's going to slot into tier 2 or it's going to be below that. It really depends on the quality of the spells across the entire game right now. And we've still not seen the full set yet. Yeah, this is me jumping the gun, sorry. Just as a reminder, this being a 6 mana spell is pretty nice for Galactic Projection Orb because you want to get recast spells that are of a higher cost, because typically higher cost spells are better, right? Unless you get Wheel of Death. Anyway, you may get Wheel of Death from this guy, Yogg in the Box. I think this is an insane spell, by the way. 8 mana Shadow Spell, cast 5 random spells. If your deck has no minions, the spells cost 5 or more. Wow. That's truly, truly insane. Now, I assume it can't cast itself. It doesn't specify, but they typically try to avoid this recurring effect on cards nowadays, so I think that Yogg can't cast itself. This card reminds me of 2 cards. Firstly, Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron, which I think is the direct comparison, and what it's really completely based on. I mean, even the box looks the same, right? But it kind of reminds me of the effect of Rune of the Archmage. And now, this was one of my favourite decks, but this was like maybe a year or 2 ago, right? Big Spell Mage, and they had Rune of the Archmage in that deck. You would copy it multiple times, you would discount it, and casting 20 mana worth of Mage spells at enemies was good enough, right? This was a big enough turn swing to win games outright. At the very least from Yogg in the Box, if you have no minions in your deck, you're getting 25 mana worth of spells. Is that just a better Rune of the Archmage? Now, you might say, no, it's not, you dummy. You have to run no minions, which is a pretty big downside. Also, Rune of the Archmage said that enemies. Also, Rune of the Archmage would cast 0-cost spells sometimes, and it would chain off these like 0-cost spells, so you could get more spells cast with Rune of the Archmage than you can with Yogg. Yogg is limited to 5. But again, it's random spells, so it's going to be spells from other classes. It's going to really depend on how good these 5 more spells are. You're going to hit Wheel of Death sometimes. You're going to galactically Wheel of Death yourself with Yogg as well. And I think you're just going to have to embrace it, sadly. You just have to embrace that sometimes you're going to play this card and you're going to lose the game, but sometimes you'll play this card and you'll win the game. Casino Mage! Put it all on black. Oh, I rolled 00. I cry. Anyway, more of this no minions in your deck. Spot the difference. 4 mana spell. Discover a 3-cost minion to summon. If your deck has no minions, repeat this. This kind of reminds me a little bit of Apex's Blast, which I think was the weaker of the cards printed for Mage, which said with no minions in your deck. By the time you're going for Apex's Blast, I think you wanted to have flipped your deck into something a little bit better. If you RNG'd into an Apex's Blast, though, after you transformed all of your spells, you're pretty happy with life, right? And that did happen quite a lot. I will say, I think Apex's Blast is slightly better. If you, compare the 2 cards, you're getting 6 mana worth of minions from Spot the Difference for 4. Apex's Blast, you get 5 mana worth of minions instead, as in 1 minion, but you got the 5 damage on top of it for the 1 extra mana, and I think that was probably the worthwhile trade, especially as you want to remove your opponent's minions and play, you want to play into a later game type of thing. I think that's true with this, especially true with this version of the no minion Mage deck. Now, obviously, to fully like elucidate whether or not this is better or worse than Apex's Blast, you have to start taking a look through the pool of 3-cost minions. Obviously, a lot of them are just battle cries, and I've not put every single one in here. From just a mage minion pool, Holo Technician could be a funny thing to get sometimes. Maybe you play your Spot the Difference, you discover Holo Technician, you play Holo Technician, and if you have enough mana left over with the button, you might be able to remove a really annoying minion, right? With your Holo Technician. You may also find Stargazer Luna, which I believe is staying in the core set for Mage, and maybe you can chain out multiple spells in your hand and just start drawing through your deck, you know, to get to these Super Galactic Orb 5 million, whatever it's called. In neutral land, there's Clearance Promoter if you want to reduce the cost of spells in your hand. Again, be careful about generating 8-cost spells. However, maybe you take your 8-cost spell into a 7-cost spell, and then you're happier, because you can't be wheeled. Other neutral cards include stuff like, you know, Bucket Soldiers from the new set. Cosplay Contestant could be pretty funny. Acolyte of Pain if you want to draw cards, like maybe you generate your Acolyte of Pain and ping it for an additional card draw. Note! Be very careful. In the 3-cost pool, there is also Floppy Hydra. Don't take a Floppy Hydra. You get to discover this, which is another advantage this has over Apex's Blast. That was a random 5-drop. This is a discovered 3-cost minion. Floppy Hydra is in neutral right now. It gets shuffled into your deck. It will ruin your no-minion deck, right? So don't do that. That would be stupid. Actually, while I'm also here on this subject, your no-minion deck could also include Reno. You can put hero cards in your deck. You can put locations in your deck. You can put weapons in your deck if Mage has access to any sort of weapon, which I don't think oh, no, they do have... No, is that rotating out? No, it's not rotating out. They have access to a weapon. So yeah, you can put those in the deck. It literally is just minions. It doesn't have to be entirely spells. So I can definitely see a world where Reno gets slotted into this deck just as a, you know, even just to turn into Reno for 5 armor and get a good button. And you run duplicates instead. Anyway, I think this, though, as I show here, it's going to be the great what was better, Deck of Lunacy or Galactic Projection Orb. It's two very similar themes with 2 different decks because, you know, the time frame between the 2. Personally, just having a look through the cards, I honestly think Deck of Lunacy might be better than Galactic Projection Orb, but we'll have to see when it comes out in the wash. I think it's better than just casting, you know, you get your Galactic Projection Orb once, right? And it's huge, huge value. Maybe it wins you the game more often than not. Maybe this is just a finisher. If you cast enough spells, you know, a Galactic Projection Orb will just win the game for you. However, I get the feeling that sometimes it will just lose the game for you as well, even though it says it targets enemies if possible. Deck of Lunacy, at the very least, you transformed your spells in your deck into ones that cost 3 more, keeping the original cost, and you could play them at the most appropriate times, or you could not play them, more importantly. Galactic Projection Orb doesn't have that going for it. That being said, some of the support with Galactic Projection Orb, I think, is pretty solid, so I think it's going to be a strong deck. I just don't know, man. It's so random. Anyway, more spells. Frost Lich Cross Stitch. 5 mana Frost spell. Deal 4 damage to a character. If it dies, summon a 3/6 water elemental that freezes. Obviously, a nod back to Frost Lich Jaina, where you would get a button which dealt 1 damage, and if it killed a minion, you would get a water elemental. Also, your elementals gave you lifesteal because of Frost Lich Jaina. And basically, you would turn into Frost Lich Jaina and you would just win the game. You would have infinite value, at least back then. The button was just so powerful, and you would trade your elementals into your opponent's minions to leave them on 1 health. You'd ping them. You'd put your water elementals onto 1 health as well and ping your own elemental to get a fresh new 3/6 water elemental. It was really, really, really obtuse to play against. So they've nodded back to that with Frost Lich Cross Stitch. How do I think of this card now? It's a single use of it. Obviously, that makes it weaker. If you see and treat a 3/6 water elemental as a 3 mana minion, which is what it is, this is kind of like 2 mana deal 4 damage to a character. It's kind of weak, to be honest with you. 2 mana for 4 damage is probably like your baseline of what you would accept. That being said, would a water elemental see play nowadays if it was available in the core set? I'm not entirely certain it would, so when I say this is a 3 mana minion, it's a 3 mana minion that probably is more of an arena card than a standard card, and maybe you value that slightly less, in which case you're spending a lot for the damage on this card. So yeah, I'm not convinced this would normally see play, maybe because you're so restricted by spells that you're going to put in your no minion deck, you will just put this card in it. I think that will be what happens here. You just have to run this because there's no other choices. However, in any other like value mage proposition, I think this is too low value. Equally, Hidden Objects, another spell, 2 mana, discover a secret, set its cost to 1. Alright, you've joined a pretty notorious pool of minions, or, you know, secret enablers in Mage. Cabal lacking Kirin Tor Mage that let you play a guy and get a secret, and all the bundle would work out as like 3 mana or less. Hidden Objects, obviously you don't get the guy. Instead, you get to discover a secret, so you can play like a 3rd secret. It doesn't have to be one you put in your deck. This is an additional one. And you get that for all 3 mana. Cool. Very cool. Downside. All of the secret synergies are rotating out, and including Objection, which was by far and away the strongest secret in the game. You're losing your Conjurer, you're losing Objection, you're losing Orion, you're losing Chatty. Vengeful Visage is also going, but I don't think anyone's missing that. But really, the big one is Objection, so probably now your best spell or secret to get is Counterspell. Is it worth running Hidden Objects in your deck to get 3 copies of Counterspell? Probably not. In which case, you're probably trying to grab stuff as well, like the, what's it called now? The Flame Rune secret? I'm so bad with names, I apologize. But obviously, it's nowhere near as good as Objection because the battle cries go off. I just don't see it. Again, it's one of these cards that I think, unless there's more secret support in the future, this card will see no play. Possibly, though, gets into no minion mage just because, you know, there's not that many secrets they can choose from. It's also on a new cycle, so a lot of secrets are rotating out. There are fewer cards to pick from, so maybe a Hidden Object just slots into this deck as, I have to play a card. I'll play Hidden Objects. Okay, now the cards that just simply don't matter, because they are minions. Watercolor Artist, 4 mana 4/4 elemental, Battlecry. Draw a frost spell. At the start of your turns, reduce its cost by 1. I actually really like this card. I like the effect on it. It's at the very least 4 mana 4/4 draw a card, which is understated for a 4-drop, but with a draw condition on it is acceptable. It also has the upside that if your opponent doesn't deal with it, then it starts discounting this spell as well by 1 every single turn. So it's pretty averagely statted, I think, for nowadays Hearthstone, or at least nowadays standard Hearthstone. Slightly understated 4-drop with a draw effect on it. It is a tutor effect, more to the point, because it is a frost spell, not just any spell, which is nice. But again, your opponent has to remove this, right? It's a bit of a threat. Kind of a low-key threat, because you don't want them to having a super powerful frost spell discounted like 3 or 4 times. Then things become very, very scary, right? Anyway, what frost spells are we looking at? Obviously, Frostlich Cross Stitch could be one of them. If you start playing this at like, 4 costs instead of 5 costs, then the proposition of value becomes very different. I think at 4 mana, then suddenly you're like, okay, I would probably slot this into other decks. You could take your Blizzard down from 6 mana. Very nice. Well, it gives, just lets you have more opportunity to play more cards after you Blizzard your opponent's board. You could also tutor this for things like Cryopreservation in your Excavate Mage deck, or Frostbolt if you're looking for some sort of, ping them in the face win condition. And both of these being discounted would not be the absolute worst thing, right? So I think it's a very solid card, but unfortunately it's a minion, so we won't see it. Speaking of which, Sleet Skater, 5 mana 3/4 elemental, miniaturize, Battlecry, freeze an enemy minion, gain armor equal to its attack, and on the right is the mini version of this. This is very similar to this card, Deepwater Evoker, which again was slotted into one of my favorite mage decks, Big Spell Mage, as you needed to gain a lot of armor and survive until you could get to this late game to start casting and cheating out your big spells. So, you look at this and you go hang on a minute, this is pretty good, right? It's pretty good. I think actually this Sleet Skater is really bad, at least the base version. So Deepwater Evoker was a 4 mana 3/4 minion. You drew a spell, you gain armor equal to its cost, which meant you had control over what the amount of armor you were going to gain was, because you would just put big spells in your deck, right? So you're guaranteed to get 8, 9, or 10 armor. It was normally 9 or 10 in the best version, I think, of the Big Spell Mage. Sleet Skater, on the other hand, you pay 1 more mana for it for the same cost, and you're at the beck and call of the opponent minions that they play. Obviously, if you can freeze a giant guy, you'll get like 8 armor, and you'll be similar to the Deep Water Evoker effect, but you'll have paid 1 more mana to freeze an enemy minion. Which then gets me to the question of how much mana would you spend to freeze an enemy minion? Would you spend a mana for that? I think it's close to that breakpoint. I think it's worth more like a half a mana. I know it's kind of like an abstract concept. But yeah, I think because of the conditions on Sleet Skater, the default form, I think it's worse than the Deep Water Evoker. However, the mini is better than the Deep Water Evoker, right? Playing this as a 1 mana, freeze a guy, gain a ton of armor, that's a lot of value. And I think this is currently my proposition on the miniaturized cards. There's a lot of them that I think are very, very good. Some of them I think are pretty bad. And then there's ones like this where it's in between, where one of the forms, either the miniaturized form or the mini form, are considerably weaker than an average card you would play in Standard. And some of them, I honestly think Sleet Skater might be weak for Arena even. So yeah, it really depends if one of the forms gives you enough value. And obviously you would probably prefer this in the non-mini form, because then you don't have to play the mana up front. You can always hold the mini for the rest of the game, it doesn't matter. Unfortunately, Sleet Skater is the other way around. Also, it's a minion, so obviously won't see any play in No Spell Mage. As a result, I think this card will see 0 play. And I think, finally, Triple Wick Trickster. 4 mana, 2/3 elemental. Battle Cry, deal 2 damage to a random enemy 3 times. Cool. Cool. To compare this card, I'll use Blast Mage Miner, if you don't mind, a card that is seeing play right now. For 2 more mana, you get 2/1 of stats. Okay, that's not quite worth it, right? That's a 1 mana effect. For 1 additional mana, you get to Excavate a Treasure. Okay, that's better than the average card. So at the very least, Blast Mage Miner on those effects is better than the Triple Wick Trickster, or as good at least. Then the effect is, for Miner, for each card in your hand, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. Trickster is 2 to 3 random enemies, so it's fixed at 6 in total. Playing Devil's Advocate, I'd probably say most times with Miner, at the very least, you're getting 6 damage worth of value from this card, right? Typically, the Excavate package actually generates more value than this, but we'll play Devil's Advocate and say it's a 6 damage effect. This still means that, all in all, encompassing these effects, Blast Mage Miner is better because you would prefer to do 6 damage split 6 ways than 6 damage split 3 ways, because sometimes you'll overkill enemies with your 2 damage. Sometimes, you know, you'll underkill it instead. So yeah, I think Triple Wick Trickster is just simply not good enough. I think it's more of an arena card than anything. Obviously, Miner also has the upside that you're probably more likely to do more than 6 damage. So yeah, I think this is just a pack filler card of all pack fillers. And again, it's a minion, so we won't see any play. Anyway, that's all of the Mage cards shown. I think Mage is, honestly, compared to some of the other classes we've seen so far, they're one of the few ones that have got this default, you're probably going to be playing this mechanic, right? As in, you're not going to put minions in your deck. Most of the other ones have been given cards and like, you know, go play with them, go do what you want with them, slot them into your decks. Maybe they push other decks better than other ones. But yeah, Mage has actually got this full ideology that you're going to be playing minionless Mage, and it's also the start of a new cycle, so this might get more support in the future, so watch this space. Anyway, thanks for watching this, and I'll see you again tomorrow for Hunter, and then the day afterwards for Death Knight. Goodbye.